Welcome back, everyone. My name is Brian Smith. I am the publisher at Inside the Nights on Fan Nation, powered by Sports Illustrated. And this is the reintroduction of the Daily Night. I am back off of Christmas vacation and traveling, and I am finally back in Florida. And today and moving forward, I'm going to have podcasts each and every day. Today is a rather big one and arguably the most important one that I will do for all of 2022 and maybe even 2023. Here's why. UCF had a good 2021 football season, the inaugural season for Coach Malzahn at UCF. He has consistently said, even before taking the field this past fall, that his goal was to win a national title at UCF. Well, like anything else, there has to be a plan, a goal. What do you do at each step to reach your final verdict, whatever it may be? With that, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I saw this year, how they can build upon them, some of my concerns, and I do have quite a few, and quite frankly, some of the things that I was surprised by that they did in a very short order. So it's a little bit of good and a little bit of bad. It's what you would expect. That being stated, here is the biggest theme overall. UCF is a program that can get to an elite level. When they go into the Big 12, that's going to help exponentially. You can't even put a number on it. Recruits want to play in Power 5. It's just true. And if you don't believe me, look at the recruiting rankings and look at the teams that consistently pump in the most NFL draft picks. It's just the way it is. That being said, I've got 6 things on my list over here. I've got a little bit in the article that I'm going to put this podcast in, but there's 6 here in this podcast that I'm going to go over just straight down the board that I think are going to be the most impactful for 2022. And it should be a microcosm of what happens as we move out to 23, 24, etc. So with that, the first thing that I want to talk about would be quarterback play. Gus Malzahn has always favored a running, very athletic, and I mean very athletic quarterback to make his offenses go. Mikey Keene is not that guy. He's a good athlete, but he is not going to be someone you hang your hat on to move the football with his legs. He's just not. Good football player, can definitely spin it, very intelligent, has some upside, but he's limited athletically. How do you complement him to make it work? That's really the biggest question for now and until it gets figured out. There isn't even a second or third place. UCF will not go very far with Mikey just being the Mikey he was this year. And I'm not talking about accuracy or sometimes not pulling the trigger when a guy's wide open. Sometimes he just had the yips and didn't make a great play. So be it. He's a freshman. He'll get better with those things. There's no doubt. But what can you do to help him, whether it's packages, running guys in and out? How do you make it happen? Here's my guess on what's going to transpire this next year. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is how I feel, and I feel very strongly about it. Keene is going to be your starting quarterback for at least the early part of 2022. Whether or not Thomas Castellanos can pass him, I think he will eventually, is just a mystery. He has to pick up the playbook. There is no way that myself, Gus Malzahn, or anybody else can project just how quickly Thomas can do that. Maybe he's able to run a package, however, especially in the first, say, 3 to 5 games where he can be a part of the offense. I have no idea how they'll do it. He could play some running back. He could play some slot. They could do all kinds of things that are eye candy to help move the football. It's the bottom line. Do you get points when you have the ball? Nothing special about that sentiment. It's just the way it is. We have to find a way to get the ball in the end zone. Castellanos is the recruit out of Ware County High School in Waycross, Georgia. Phenomenal athlete, recruited by schools across the country, blah, blah, blah. But most of them wanted him to play running back, DB, or receiver. UCF is one of the few schools that really wanted him to play QB. And to be honest with you, I was skeptical until I went and saw him play live. He has a cannon for an arm, and he could make some of those off-platform throws that you just can't teach. So with that being stated, I'm curious to see what he can do. His ceiling is much higher than Mikey's because his skill set fits what Malzahn wants to do, because he could play tailback at Alabama, flat out. Now he also has a gun. He can throw the ball 50 yards on a rope without putting his back leg into it all the way 100%. He has that kind of arm strength. It's insane. So now how do you find a way to get him into the game? And I'm just going to make the following statement. If Keene is the quarterback next year, and again, I expect him to be the starter at least early in the season. I mean, he knows the playbook. If you don't know the playbook, talent is irrelevant. In football, quarterback is played from here up 90% of it. It's just the way it is. If Keene is the quarterback and there is no quote unquote supplement to what he is doing, even if he does take a step up and throwing the ball, I have a hard time believing they're above 8-4 next year. They may not even make 8-4. He's not going to help you beat teams that have at least borderline NFL talent at their quarterback position. He's just not good enough. He could be. I mean, maybe he can take a jump that I don't see. That happens. Look at the kid at Pittsburgh this year. He had 13-9 2 years in a row. And then this year, it's one of the biggest jumps in the history of football at any level for a quarterback. And now he's going to go after the draft. So it can happen, but that was a fifth-year senior. This is a freshman going to a sophomore. I don't see that. So with that being stated, Keene is not, in my opinion, good enough to get you anything above 7 or 8 wins. They have to supplement. Graduate transfer, maybe Castellanos, maybe it's both. I don't know which player or players they're targeting. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. By the way, make no mistake, that's how a lot of things in the transfer portal will happen and already have. Before they enter their name, there's phone calls made. Would you guys be interested if we – that's just the way of the world. So UCF probably has an idea if they're going to take a graduate transfer. It's not like they're going to announce it, and there's nothing for anybody like myself or Jason Beede or anybody else in the media to cover it. It just gets announced. So we'll wait just like everybody else out there. But UCF absolutely needs to upgrade the overall quarterback room. Joey Gatewood has not proven that he can be the quarterback. He doesn't seem to have it figured out for whatever reason. Very talented young man, great kid, by the way. Met him last spring by accident at a high school game. But they have to find a way to use him, and I'm going to come back to that here in a minute. And they have to find a way to use Castellanos. They're not going to get above 8-4 with what they have at Keene. So that's number one. Part of what I just said is also part of number two, and that's just the freshman class. They have very good freshmen. Gus Malzahn, like any coach, wants to talk up his recruits and all that. I scouted these kids. I saw all but like 2 of them play live. They're legit. Their recruiting class is very good. It's just not as deep as some others because they take more transfer kids, etc. So it's different. But the players that they did sign out of the high school ranks, there's no doubt about it. They're going to play next year. Nakai Martinez, he's going to find himself on the field. The twins, etc., Cameron Moore, they'll find roles for him, even if it's just special teams. That's critical. If you can count on your freshmen, count on them to take reps away from guys that are starters, for instance, like a key linebacker. Jeremiah plays linebacker for UCF. He doesn't come off the field much. If he doesn't play quite as many snaps on special teams because Cameron plays some, that saves him wear and tear, and he can play on 1st and 10 more, etc. Those things matter. That's the one thing I'm super excited about for this next year. And I know Coach Malzahn and his staff feel the same. They brought in good football players. They did. They flat out brought in good football players. This is going to elevate the program long term. Good for them. Now you have to find very specific niches for them early on, which I'm sure they're going to try to do. I'm just stating it for the record. If they can get whoever comes in this spring and quote unquote really puts an effort into learning the playbook, it's not about talent once you get to the college level because everybody's got talent. It's about finding a way to use that talent schematically. Here's an example. I forget the young man's name, but the running back at East Carolina, I was really worried about what UCF would be able to do against him this past year. Kid is electric. He was averaging like 9 yards a carry, 9.6 or something. It was just insane. The bottom line is UCF did a really good job of coming up with a scheme. The players bought into it, and all of the talent worked together. You're not going to just beat a guy that's in a future NFL running back with one guy chasing him around. It's a schematic thing. do your job, hit your run fit, etc. It's just the same thing over and over. There is no new magic formula for run defense. And that's part of what these freshmen can help with. Even if they're not the ones out there chasing a guy like that, whoever it may be on the schedule for 2022, they have to be able to come in and hit the home run in terms of playing time on special teams, being a reserve that can get, just a few reps. If you take 5 or 10 reps off of a starter, whatever position you want to name, that constantly rotates in and out, especially on defense, it really helps the back end of your schedule. Defensive players get the bejesus beat out of them. They have to chase a rabbit every game. It's harder to play defense physically. You're going to go through that. The one exception I might say to that is running back, like Bowser obviously gets beat up a lot. That's the ball carrier. That's self-explanatory. UCF especially needs the freshmen to come in and contribute in some way. Special teams is part of it. That's the start. Secondary to that, they need 3 to 5 of the defensive players to at least push in spring ball. And over summer, they compete in different ways in summer to be on the 2 deep. You need competition. Let me put it to you like this. When Miami built their program in the late 70s through the mid 80s, it was just open competition. Florida State was the same thing. Now, both those programs did a phenomenal job of evaluations. And there weren't a bunch of guys like me out throwing out recruiting rankings and all that. And by the way, I'm going to have a bunch of those for 2023 here in the state of Florida coming up very, very soon, starting tonight, actually. With that being stated, UCF is basically doing the same thing. Their evaluations are really good. They took a few kids that I think can help them that other programs, quite frankly, passed on. People are going to be really angry with themselves when they see how good the Griffin kid is out of Georgia. He has NFL potential. UCF, and I mean, he had some offers, but he didn't get near the offers he should have. That kid can dunk on your head and be on the lead for SportsCenter. And when I mean dunk on your head, take it off somebody's head. He is that guy. Somebody like him can play next year if he figures out the playbook. Same thing with a guy like TJ Bullard. He is meant to play that overhang position at linebacker that is such a pain in the rear because you got to be part safety, part corner, part linebacker. It's a weird position because it just depends on who lines up at safety, or excuse me, in the slot on a given play. It could be a tight end, a running back, a receiver. It's hard. They found a very unique athlete who has some upside, who can really run and hit. He didn't get recruited by many because he's undersized. I will grant you he's undersized, but there's a role for him. Travis found a kid he liked. He recruited him, and that was the end of it. They did their own evaluations. I love that. Travis even talked about that at the bowl. They just went with their eye test. That's good. So get those freshmen on the depth chart. You got them here. Now you got to coach them up and put them into play. And of course, again, that's obviously the goal, but we need to see it. And we'll know based on the following. Gus Malzahn doesn't give away much in a press conference. That's obvious. But when we ask about the freshmen, he's going to talk about kids if they do something. He's pretty point blank with it. That's one thing he will do. If I ask about Tyler or Keanis Thompson, whatever it may be, and there isn't a lot of information coming out of Gus Malzahn's mouth, that's not a good sign. So with that in mind, next fall is very important, about midway through fall camp, whenever they have that bigger press conference. They're not going to have the freshmen for us to go interview. It'll be all juniors and seniors. It just will. It'll be Ryan O'Keefe, guys like that. And that's fine. But the freshmen, it's very important they get on the field. In conjunction with recruiting in the freshmen, the first national signing day was the 15th of December, 2021. The second signing day is going to be on the 2nd of February, and it's a Wednesday. It's always the first Wednesday in February. They have a chance to get another high school kid or two. I have no idea what's going to happen. There could be kids that back out of their signatures, or they're allowed out. Anything is plausible in today's world. That's one thing. The other is I would anticipate a few more kids announcing that they are transferring to UCF. In addition to that, as we saw this past year, UCF, and there is no specific timeline for a portal player. Joey Gatewood transferred in like right at the beginning of the season. I mean, it's awkward. UCF will probably add players after this second semester. Recruiting is totally different now. I can't like rank a kid and just say, well, he was the last commitment for, USC or Texas or Florida State or what. Because of the portal, you can sort of start a recruiting class ranking, but the portal is a big part of it. And especially for the Florida schools, Miami, Florida State, and UCF have been really heavy with the portal over the last year or so. And I think a lot of it, it's just a lot of kids would like to live in Florida for a while. Okay, fair enough. UCF's taking advantage of that. I think they're going to sign another 5+ players from the portal, and they really need to hit that on defense. Again, like I was saying, it's harder to play D because you're chasing. It's harder on your body. You need more players. They're losing Kalia Davis. You're not going to replace him to begin with, so you need numbers. Cam Good really stepped his game up, by the way. I want to throw that out there. He was so much better in the bowl game than what I anticipated. It's not even funny. He's really improved. They need to find at least one, if not two, defensive tackles between now and next fall. I asked Travis about recruiting defensive tackles. Why didn't you sign one? He said, we feel good about the guys we got. I don't completely buy that because I think that you would take certain guys if they wanted to come. That's just the way it is. That being stated, maybe they'll get one or two. It's a long way from being over. Certain kids get mad. Certain kids are like, they're happy, but then their position coach leaves. A kid from Louisville could all of a sudden be really ticked off. Pick a school. I mean, I'm just throwing them out. I have no idea. When a coach leaves, a kid gets ticked. Kids pick schools based on their coaches, not the coaches being to the side. And that's the addition. We pick the school because of the school. Alums that love their school. That's not how it works. They pick it because of the coaches, period. That's today's world, and it's not going to change. That being stated, they also need to add at least a couple linebackers. Just depth. They didn't have enough this year. It's going to be interesting to see what they can do. They need, they lose a really good player at that edge position who they got from the portal this past year. Matter of fact, I'm going to pull up some stats here for UCF. But if you think about what the portal did for UCF this year, it's incredible. Where would UCF have been without it? UCF was in a situation where they got Big Cat, for one. Ricky Barber, who's coming back. He's a very good football player at 3 Tech. Just those two, if they just stopped there, they'd have been in a pretty good spot. But then they also got Bryson Armstrong. That's 3 starters on defense that you got. That's really hard to do every year. And while it sounds great, I highly doubt that happens again this next year, but it could. They need to hit the home run with the portal on defense. It may only be 1 or 2 guys, but it needs to be guys that have the ability to get paid and play on Sundays. That's a big ask, but if you're only going to sign around 15 kids, give or take, from the high school ranks, there is no other option, unless you just want to be continuously 8-4. As I noted coming into the podcast, this is about, what do we do for the next steps? Either you sign elite high school players and a bunch of them, or you combine it with the portal. UCF is going the secondary route there, and that's fine. They have to hit on a couple of those kids, especially on defense. With that, and this is the one I don't know, I'm open. You can hit me up on Twitter or whatever you want at FBScout_Florida is my main handle. Look, I don't know who it's going to be, but every year there are surprises in college football. Kenny Pickett, who I mentioned a little bit ago, the Pittsburgh quarterback. He almost won the Heisman. He was nobody his first 4 years and came back for that COVID year, for that 5th year of eligibility, and he just tore it up. Who steps up for UCF and makes that major impact in 2022? I don't know what person it's going to be. but just the way my mind thinks, I hope it's a defensive player, because if you look at this, just as an example of some of the bowl games, key defensive players change games. And when you take one out for injury or opt out or whatever, it completely changes what a defense can or cannot do. I'll give you 2 games as an example, and one of them's still, I'm mind boggled by this. When Alabama played Cincinnati, in my opinion, has the best combination of their top 3 corners of any team in the country. It's the most unique thing I've ever seen. All 3 corners are NFL players, in my opinion, 2 of which could be first-round picks. And all 3 of them were, guys that were Division I players coming out of high school, but none of them were elite. Corner, you usually got to recruit the guy. They hit on 3. I mean, that'll maybe never happen again. With that stated, Alabama was missing John Mechie. Tremendous football player. I believe he had like 96 receptions, but he's got an injury. He's done for the year. Mechie's not going to play against Georgia, which that's another story. That could be a little more hurtful for them against the Bulldogs than it was against the Bearcats. But still, Cincinnati sat back and played cover 2. They didn't really utilize their best talent. Even Bush, who's their third corner, I mean, Gardner and Bryant are studs, but I think Bush is really good. They played cover 2, and Alabama just ran it down their throat. It might have been the worst defensive game plan I have ever seen in a major game. Horrific. What the hell y'all doing? UCF is not in a position to do that. And quite frankly, even Alabama and Georgia are not at corner right now. They're not even in the same stratosphere as Cincinnati. It's goofy. Again, they hit on 3 guys that were just, they kind of took flyers on. They were pretty good, but, Ohio State didn't want any of those kids. Michigan didn't go after those kids. And they were right there in their backyard. Those kids are all Ohio, Michigan kids. So Cincinnati, A, coached them up, and B, they figured some things out, individually as players. Good for them. They're all very good. But then they didn't use them really well. And I don't understand it. Conversely, again, you're just not utilizing your talent. That's on you. The Oklahoma State Notre Dame game. Best safety in the country this year is Kyle Hamilton for Notre Dame. He opts out. Notre Dame is very thin at safety. When he's not in there, they can't run near as many blitz packages, and they can't do near as much with man coverage. They got annihilated against the quarterback who just got red hot. You need talent in the back end, and it could be somebody stepping up. I mean, somebody could have just had a great game for Notre Dame or for Cincinnati and help make up for what happened, but it's not likely to just happen suddenly at the end of a season. You need something to develop in spring, summer, and then early fall camp, and then you kind of know what you're going to have. That's usually how football works. First game all the way through the bowl game. Who's it going to be for UCF? Which guy? Cam kind of stepped up. I mean, he was pretty good this year, but he had that great game against Florida. He was stud. Who's it going to be that kind of does that all the way through for UCF next year? And maybe Cam does that. That's part of it. Which guy? Maybe one on each side of the ball. They need somebody to step up on the roster. And Saban talks about this. Brian Kelly will talk about this. Anybody who wants it and who's going to work their rear end off. You hear all the phrases, January, February, and March, during those horrific 2 months to 2.5 months when the workouts, I've seen some of these things, they are not friendly. I mean, just there's a reason they put buckets down at the end of the line sometimes. Okay, the buckets aren't for very friendly things that go in it. The running and the bending and the pushing weights off that are on the ground. The guys that do that have a better chance, for one, and UCF's got a very good strength and conditioning program. I'm not worried about that at all. But who still wants it? Who eats right? Who doesn't go out and parties? Who isn't using drugs and drinking and acting like an idiot? Every single thing that you do between now and when spring concludes for the Knights, sometime in March, April, whatever it ends up being this year, is probably going to be the reason they do or do not have guys that step up and take that next level. They don't have to be Big Cat Bryant. Let's see how many tackles and all that he had. But Big Cat this past season had 52 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks. They brought him in from the portal from Auburn. Man, that's hard to replace. But that doesn't mean they can't have somebody that's, played some, like Seliscar. He really tapered off some. He didn't play quite as much with Tre'mon stepping up. That's another guy. But now Seliscar he's going to get those reps, I would assume, that Big Cat did. That's your 2 edge defenders, and that's 2 hellacious athletes. Can he take that step? And then who's the guy behind him? Because they're going to get banged up. Who's that guy that does it at DN? That's DN, corner, and quarterback are the 3 positions, in my opinion, and many for that matter, that impact the final score more than any other. You have to get to the quarterback. You have to make the quarterback wait, meaning the corners are holding down the defense. And then, of course, your own quarterback has to make plays. If UCF can find one more pass rusher to go with those 2, because they rotated all 3 of those, Big Cat, Josh Seliscar, Tre'mon, Morris-Brash, that's a really good group right there. That's an SEC level group of 3. With that being stated, you got to remember Big Cat was a transfer. They need a guy like that to come in. Maybe it doesn't have to be Big Cat, but needs somebody. And they also need somebody to step up. Perhaps it's one of the freshmen. Perhaps it's a guy that's on the roster now. Maybe it's a guy that moves positions. Who knows? Somebody has to do it. Next, and this is just something that I have tried like heck to understand, and it's weird how certain schools just go on runs at positions. Like somebody can be wide receiver U or this or that. Like LSU right now, in the last 10 to 12 years at receiver is insane. Notre Dame at tight end is just insane. They put a guy in the NFL every other year at least. LSU puts a receiver in the NFL every year. It's weird. For whatever reason, UCF has just bare minimum history at tight end. Holler did pretty good this year, and he'll be back next season. They need, at minimum, 2 more players to do something for Gus Malzahn and his offense to operate fully. When I started off talking about quarterback play, Mikey Keene is going to benefit more than anything else as far as another position elevating itself. It's tight end. It's number 1. And here's why. Packages. They can run more 2 tight end sets and even, for lack of a better phrase, 13 personnel, 1 running back, 3 tight ends. If they have the players, and they can run all kinds of cross action, different running plays for a guy like Bowser or Mark Anthony Richards, you have to find ways to get more talent there. I'm not sure, again, why it's been that way at UCF. And Alex is a good player. But if you put another tight end on the field that's a great athlete, it changes what the defense does at safety, which changes the play call, potentially at least. If they're in too high safety because they're scared of what's at receiver / tight end, a guy like Bowser will murder you. They need to have something go right at tight end. And here's something to think about. What if Holler had been banged up this year and missed, let's say, 4 games? High ankle sprains. It's something annoying like that just lingers. It happens. Now, what are the odds of that not happening 2 seasons in a row? UCF absolutely, unequivocally needs to add a couple of tight ends that can play next year in addition to Mr. Holler. I don't know if Stevens, who's one of the recruits, is going to be that guy. Again, got to learn the playbook. Talent's there, and he's a hell of a receiving tight end. But can he do something that allows himself to be a good enough blocker yet? He's 225, 230. I don't know. How would they use him? There are a lot of questions there that need to be worked out through practice. But you still need to get a grad transfer or a JUCO kid. No question. At minimum, if not 2 of them. I would still take 2. That way, when somebody gets hurt, you can still rotate 2, 3 guys in a game. It would really help. And to be a little bit more specific, in the run game, a lot of cross blocks and blocking down, wham blocks, where they let a guy shoot through, but that the tight end comes across and hits him. Some riskier running plays, but some of those things you're not going to run as often when you have this one guy you're really, really relying on. You can't have him get banged up. It's hard enough playing tight end. It's a super physical position anyway. It's one of the highest risk positions based on NFL numbers, along with safety, middle linebacker, fullback. Pretty much that there is. Those are the guys that get thrown out of the league the fastest because they're always hurt. We need more guys at tight end. Finally, the last piece, and I'll go back to Cam Good again. He stepped up and played tremendous in the bowl game. When you have a 3 technique making plays, it changes the other team's makeup, if you will, what they're going to call. When they see, hey, first 2 quarters, we didn't block this guy. They're in halftime. It changes what they do in quarters 3 and quarter 4 as well. I don't know which guy it's going to be, but they need a defensive guy to kind of be, for lack of a better phrase, a look at me guy. Not that I'm saying that intentionally. I know Gus doesn't really need guys acting like idiots or anything like the 1990 Miami team, a bunch of idiots jumping around, but there needs to be something that UCF develops just based on the current roster, forget the recruits, etc., that kind of takes that next step. I think Devontae is the most likely. He's a pretty darn good corner. And I think corner in general is really headed in the right direction. But it could be a defensive lineman. It could be really just about any position. The question is whether or not it's a guy the other team respects and has to game plan for. Let me put it to you like this. If you know you can't block Cam Good or Tatum Bethune or whatever in a certain play that you like to run a lot, it's your bread and butter, it changes your offensive game plan. That changes the scoreboard, and that changes your win-loss record. Can you find one more guy on the current roster that is a flat-out difference maker? I think that guy started to develop this year, and I think he's the most talented player on the roster for next season, even if, and I have no idea before anybody asks me, even if Isaiah Bowser comes back, I think the number 1 player on the team next year is Tre'mon Morris-Brash. I told him that after the game the other night when they played Florida a couple weeks ago. You can't teach his first step, his get-off. He also plays a premier position playing D-end. If he's that way, and again, you add like one more guy to go on with Josh Seliskar, so you could rotate 3 like they did with Big Cat this year, you could win a few games that you probably shouldn't have. Mikey Keen's off that day. The other team's defense playing good, whatever. You can get a strip sack, scoop, and score and win a game on one play. That's why football is beautiful, because one play can completely change the outcome. But is there anybody else? I mean, he kind of showed it already. Tre'mon, the last 4 to 5 games, teams struggled to block him. He is flat out an SEC defensive end off the – he can play at Alabama, no question about it. Can they find somebody else? And Devontae is my pick. Devod could take another step forward. There's a lot of possibilities. The guy I hope is an addition to it is a certain defensive back who's just a great athlete that's just learning how to play football, and that's Adams. He's 6'2", 6'3", playing corner. I wouldn't be surprised if they moved him to safety to get more guys on the field. He played quarterback, receiver, whatever he could to help his team in Atlanta in high school, and then he comes to UCF, and he started a few games at corner. He's too talented not to be in the rotation, which they already have, but I also think he's too talented not to be starting. Another spring, another offseason, etc. So let's see how that goes. With that, here's the last thing. I'm going to have quite a few segments kind of breaking down some of this stuff coming down the pipe. And also I'm going to FGA report. That's another segment that I have talking about recruits in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, FGA. Please make sure you check that out. It's on my YouTube channel. It's going to be a lot of fun doing that. And these are the kids that UCF is going to recruit. So make sure you hit the like button, subscribe. Everybody have a great day, and I will talk to you very soon.